In Chile, citizens will go to the polls on Sunday for a new constitutional referendum following the failure of the one held in 2022. In Palestine, communications in Gaza have been cut off for the third consecutive day due to Israeli attacks. And the United Nations called for an end to hostilities in Sudan as its humanitarian aid operations are constrained by escalating violence. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Chile, people will go to the polls on Sunday for a new constitutional referendum following the failure of the one held in 2022. Nearly 15 million Chileans are expected to take part in the referendum, for which at least 3,118 polling stations have been set up, including 119 overseas. People will be voting on a new proposal for a new Magna Carta to be submitted to the Constitutional Council. Electoral authorities have urged for a peaceful voting day and reminded people that those who choose not to go to vote may be fined. The president of Bolivia, Luis Arce, inaugurated the first industrial lithium carbonate plant with a production capacity of 15,000 tons per year. The investment for the construction of the plant exceeds $110 million and is located in the municipality of Yipi, where the Uyuni salt flat is. The Bolivian president said that this action is part of their program for the industrialization of lithium and comprises a mixed investment of $2,800 million, with the participation of Chinese companies and the Russian corporation Rosatom. In Peru, the people demonstrated against the Boluarte administration for the death of 10 citizens during the protests that took place 1 year ago in the Ayacucho region. The Ayacucho People's Defense Front called a strike in memory of the deceased and demanded justice, dignity, corrupt officials to leave office, and freedom for those detained in the framework of the struggles for the defense of democracy. A mass was held this morning in memory of the deceased, and it was attended by relatives of the victims. In the afternoon, demonstrations and vigils were held to remember the so-called martyrs of Ayacucho. Ecuador will expel some 1,500 foreign inmates, mostly from Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela, as part of the government's plan to mitigate the growing violence of drug trafficking and criminal gangs. The announcement was made by the nation's president, Daniel Noboa, on Friday, who added that the foreign ministry was already in contact with his counterparts in Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela, from where more than 80% of these 1,500 inmates are. According to the 2022 prison census, there are 3,245 inmates of foreign nationality in the country, representing 10% of the total prison population of 31,321. Ecuador's violent prisons are frequent scenes of killings, where since February 2021, at least a dozen incidents have left more than 460 inmates dead. In Guatemala, the National Electoral Court qualified as unalterable the results of the presidential election held in August, during which the SID movement leader Bernardo Arévalo was elected president. The highest judicial instance in the country ordered the Congress to guarantee Arévalo's swearing-in by accepting an appeal for protection against the maneuvers of the prosecution, which seeks to prevent him from assuming power on January 14th. The court decided to urge Guatemala's Congress to guarantee the effective inauguration of every official elected in the 2023 electoral process. The resolution also protects the inauguration of Vice President Karin Herrera, 160 deputies, 340 mayors, and 20 representatives to the Central American Parliament elected in this year's elections. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador inaugurated the first stage of the Mayan Train, a work that will be referenced to boost the economy and tourism of the southeast region. The president informed that the Mayan Train will travel through 5 states, starting in Mexico City and ending in Quintana Roo, and asked that the price of tickets for this new transportation system not be excessive. López Obrador also highlighted the work of the thousands of workers involved in the construction of the train.
It gives us great pleasure to be here with you in Campeche. On this truly historic day, because we are inaugurating this section from Campeche to Cancun.
Es una obra que en su totalidad
A work that in its entirety comprises 1,554 kilometers.
1.554 kilómetros.
We're now going to inaugurate the Campeche-Cancun section,
Este tramo, Campeche-Cancún,
then Cancun-Palenque.
Palenque.
Cuba and Chile stood out in the choral awards of the 44th International Festival of New Latin American Cinema held in Havana, Cuba. The South American nation won the Global Rocha Award presented by the Foreign Press and sponsored by Cuba's news agency Prensa Latina for its film Los Colonos. On the other hand, Cuba received the Megano Award from the Cuban National Federation of the Film Clubs, the Cine Plaza Award, and the Sumate Award for the film La Mujer Salvaje. Cuban filmmaker and director of the film, Alan Gonzalez, emphasized that the event demonstrated sincerity and love for art. Let's now take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find Welcome back from the South. In Palestine, communications in Gaza have been cut off for the third consecutive day due to Israeli attacks. The Palestinian Red Crescent pointed out that the suspension of communications poses significant challenges for these teams when reaching the wounded and patients, as people are unable to call the emergency service. In this context, a delegation from the International Committee of the Red Cross held talks on a number of topics, including strengthening cooperation under increasingly challenging conditions in order to provide a better humanitarian response to the people of Gaza affected by the Israeli bombings. The situation in Gaza is dire, with the south and center of the region facing a critical lack of internet access. The ongoing conflict has led to numerous attacks, resulting in a staggering death toll of more than 18,500 people. In this report, our correspondent Nur Harsin provides analysis of the current situation.
I am talking to you after more than 40 hours without network, without internet. The Gaza Strip is now isolated. There is some network only in the northern areas of Gaza. However, southern and middle Gaza is totally isolated from the whole world. We are speaking to you now while the Gaza Strip is under heavy Israeli fire. According to journalists in the north, there is massacres being committed in the north, specifically inside the Kamal Udwan hospital. Anas al-Sharif, who was a reporter in northern Gaza, said that the Israeli bulldozers stormed into the hospital. They even went over the tents of the displaced people. Tens were killed and injured, and people were buried alive in the yard of the Kamal Udwan hospital. And this is according to the journalist who is reporting from the north. Here in the south, there is continuous Israeli strikes in Khan Yunis. 12 people were killed. In Rafah, 20 people were killed. And this brings up the death toll here in Gaza in the past 10 weeks, since the 7th of October, to more than 18,500 people killed in the coastal enclave.
An Israeli strike on Friday against the city of Khan Yunis killed cameraman Samer Abu Taka and wounded his chief correspondent in Gaza, Will Datu. The Al Jazeera television network said that the two men were reporting at a school that had been hit by an earlier airstrike when a drone launched a second strike. Speaking from a hospital bed, Datu told the network that he managed to walk to an ambulance, but Abu Daka lay bleeding in the school and died hours later. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, Abu Daka is the 64th journalist killed since the conflict erupted between Hamas and Israel last October 7th. The city of Khan Yunis has been the main target of Israel's ground offensive in the south.
I kept on walking until I reached an ambulance and they started stopping the bleeding, even temporarily, and we got into the vehicle. I asked them to return to our cameraman colleague Samer Abu Daka. We could still hear him, and he was screaming, but I couldn't see where he was injured. Most likely, he was injured in the lower body. Ambulance workers say that we had to leave immediately, and they would send another car to the area in order to not be all targeted.
The Israeli army reported the suspension of the soldiers who broke into the Jenin mosque and sang Jewish songs. According to the military authorities, the soldiers were immediately withdrawn from operational activity after viewing videos and an initial inspection of the incident by commanders. The army expressed that the behavior of the soldiers is serious and goes against the values of the Israeli Defense Forces. However, the provocative presence of Zionist government ministers in the esplanade of the mosque is a recurrent practice that Tel Aviv, far from questioning, encourages. And in Israel, hundreds of protesters demonstrating from the Kiryat military base in Tel Aviv after the Israeli army announced that it had killed 3 Israeli hostages. The Zionist regime acknowledged to have mistakenly killed 3 of their own Israeli hostages during an active combat in Sheheiya, Gaza. Israel Defense Forces spokesman Daniel Hagari assured during a press briefing on Friday that the IDF shot them dead after mistakenly identifying them as a threat. The protesters are waving signs with the names and pictures of the deceased: Yotam Haim, 28 years old, Samar Talalka, 24 years old, and Alon Shamris.
Just today, we were at the funerals of 3 abductees. And just today, we were informed of the death of 3 more of them. You have so much power for the cabinet, but you only understand military power. You only want the military. It won't work for you. We will not be silent while more and more abductees die in Gaza. Deal now, deal now, deal now.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. The United Nations calls for an end to hostilities in Sudan as its humanitarian aid operations are constrained by escalating violence. UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs Martin Griffiths called for an end to the fighting after 8 months of war in the African nation, after new clashes were reported on Friday on the outskirts of the Wet Medani town in an area known as Sudan's Breadbasket, a situation that threatens thousands of civilians already displaced by the conflict. Given the present critical situation, the agency announced that all humanitarian missions have been cut off until further notice in the state of Al Jazeera, home to more than 500,000 men, women and children who fled the fighting since April 15th. Chad voters go to the polls on December 17th for a referendum on a new constitution in a key step towards elections and the return of civilian rule promised but postponed by the ruling junta. Chad votes on new constitution ahead of promised end of military rule. A large section of the opposition and civil society in the Central African country are calling for a boycott. Didier Garmadji, a student in the capital, said that the population already know the result, so it's better to stay at home. Voters there are urging a yes vote to bring in a constitution for a unitary and decentralized state, while the opposition, which advocates federalism, backs the no vote.
It is a very decisive moment for Chad, and it is time for Chadians to make up their minds. After the painful period we have had, from 2020-2021 until now. We need to decide what type of constitution we want. My wish now is for all Chadians to come out, so that we can decide together what we want for the future of Chad.
I expect this election to be transparent and peaceful, and for the results to be announced without any cheating. All the things we're used to in Chad, we're going to have really cordial atmosphere, because we have already gone through a transition. This transition will have to be completed under very good conditions.
The government of Niger announced a transition agreement before the deadline set for the intervention of the Economic Community for West African States, ECOWAS. The information was announced by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Togo, Robert Toussey, who pointed out that as a result of the mediation, the content of the proposal and the moment of the transition were agreed upon, with the military board in power since the coup d'etat perpetrated in July. In the agreement, it was also established a new day of mediation for January 2024 with the participation of diplomats from Togo and Sierra Leone. And preparations were underway in polling stations and on the streets of Baghdad as Iraqis get ready to head to the polls to choose provincial councils for the first time since April 2013. Campaign posters were seen on the streets on Friday, days ahead of the December 18th vote. In Baghdad's Karrala neighborhood, security personnel are deployed outside polling stations to guard them. Tassin al-Kafafi, an Iraqi security official, said that the preparations were done with an openness between sectors and included redistribution security sources. The elections are held without the Satrist movement, one of the most prominent political movements in Iraq. Influential Iraqi Shiite cleric and political leader Muqtada al-Sadr announced his group will boycott the elections, a move expected to empower his opponents at the House of Representatives. The opposition movement sees the provincial councils as fertile ground for corruption. The elections are taking place in most of Iraq's governorates but will not include the Kurdish region. The Indian Ministry of Foreign Affairs denounced the increase in illegal recruitment of Indian nationals to work in Eastern Europe, the Gulf, and Central Asia. In a statement, the ministry detailed that it had detected charges of between $2,400 and more than $6,000 by individuals operating without the required license for such procedures. The document advises citizens that job offers valid outside India are accompanied by a contract signed by the foreign employer. The text also warns on-racer agencies to refrain from such activities and invites citizens seeking employment abroad to use only safe and legal services. In Japan, more than 1,200 tons of dead fish are found allegedly as a result of the release of radioactive water on the coast. After a month of radioactive water treated at the Fukushima nuclear power plant being dumped into the sea, the authorities have announced the launch of an investigation to determine the causes of the mass mortality from the Hakodate fishing station, as they are presumed to have been part of a boat of migrating to the south of the island. However, the Japanese authorities doubt that the phenomenon is linked to the release of treated water from the nuclear power plants. In the United States, on Friday, at least one person was killed and several wounded in a shooting near a shopping mall in the city of Los Angeles. The incident took place around 2 p.m. local time on 2nd Boulevard Street. According to a police report, at least 5 people were injured, all of them males between the ages of 30 and 50, who were taken to a hospital. A 32-year-old man was pronounced dead due to complications from a gunshot wound in the upper torso. 3 others are in stable condition, and the 4th victim remains in critical condition. The police continues to investigate the incident and search for the attacker. Now we have come to the end of this news brief, but before saying goodbye, we want to thank our Caribbean audience, especially the audience of Trinidad and Tobago. We are pleased to share our newscast and contribute to provide an alternative news source of the latest world events. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.